There comes a moment in every avoidant's inner journey when the facade finally cracks, not because someone forced it, but because the psyche itself refuses to keep carrying a story that is no longer true. The avoidant has spent months, years, sometimes even a lifetime constructing a carefully controlled image, one that insists they are unaffected, unbothered, untouched by closeness. They rehearse distance the way others rehearse affection, and for a while, it works. The mask fits, the walls hold, the performance feels safe. But the human heart has a way of leaking truth through the smallest fractures. Even the person who fears intimacy cannot outrun the deeper parts of themselves. Beneath their detachment lies a self that wants to connect, a self that feels, a self that remembers. And when that buried self grows strong enough, silence no longer protects them. It exposes them. Their behavior begins revealing what their words never could. They start watching you more closely, thinking about you more than they admit, reacting more strongly than they intended. The unconscious speaks in glances, hesitations, irritations, dreams, signs they can't hide no matter how hard they try. This is the turning point. This is the moment the avoidant can't pretend they don't care anymore. It isn't a dramatic confession or a sudden transformation. It is a quiet collapse of old defenses. The armor becomes too heavy. The emotional distance becomes too painful. Their own avoidance begins to betray them. They catch themselves remembering your voice, replaying your conversations, feeling your absence in places they never expected. And with every attempt to push those feelings down, they rise up again, stronger, insisting on being acknowledged. Inside them, a conflict begins, the part that longs to stay safe versus the part that longs to be real. When the real self starts to surface, the avoidant is confronted with the truth they've hidden from everyone, especially themselves. That they do care, that they always cared, that the act of not caring was never strength but fear disguised as control. When this realization hits, even their silence is different. Even their distance feels different. The emotional wall stops being a boundary and becomes a prison. They're no longer keeping others out. They're keeping themselves trapped. And that is the moment the performance dies. When the avoidant stops pretending, what emerges is not weakness, but humanity. Their truth becomes visible in the way they show up imperfectly, the way they hesitate before reaching out, the way they struggle to express what they once hid behind indifference. Caring becomes undeniable, vulnerability becomes unavoidable, and connection becomes something they no longer run from because running has become far more painful than staying. This is not the end of their journey. It is the beginning of their awakening. For once the avoidant can't pretend they don't care anymore. The only path left is the path toward honesty, courage, and emotional integration. And on that path, they finally meet the version of themselves they've spent their whole life avoiding. The avoidant reaches a point where the unconscious truth begins to overpower the persona they've been performing, revealing the feelings they've tried to exile. This moment does not arrive suddenly, nor does it present itself with clear logic or organized thought. It begins subtly, almost invisibly, as a slow accumulation of internal pressure. The persona they crafted, the self that insists on being independent, self-contained, and emotionally untouchable, starts showing fractures. This persona has been their armor for a long time, often developed through early experiences where closeness felt unsafe or engulfing. They learned that feelings were better hidden, that dependency was dangerous, that vulnerability only invited disappointment or rejection. So they built an identity around distance, self-reliance, and emotional silence, believing that if they could convince the world they didn't need anyone, they could protect themselves from ever being hurt. But the unconscious has its own agenda. It holds everything the avoidant suppresses, every longing, every fear, every unspoken desire for connection. It keeps a record of every moment where they wished to be understood, every time they wanted comfort, every instance where they felt affection but didn't allow themselves to express it. These feelings do not disappear simply because the conscious mind refuses them. They collect beneath the surface, gathering shape and weight. Eventually, they begin to push against the persona, seeking expression through behaviors the avoidant doesn't fully understand. They may start thinking about someone more often than they want to. Their dreams may become more emotionally charged. Their reactions may become stronger, sharper, or more defensive. They begin noticing the person they claim not to care about in ways they can't rationalize. The unconscious leaks into their daily actions, exposing traces of the truth they thought they had buried. Even the avoidant's emotional detachment begins to shift. Where once they could easily disconnect, now they feel a flicker of concern, irritation, or longing that surprises them. These emotional intrusions create a sense of inner conflict. The persona says, "I don't care," but the unconscious whispers, "You do." The gap between these two selves becomes harder to maintain. They might find themselves remembering small details that matter more than they want to admit. They might feel a pull towards someone they keep trying to push away. They may attempt to suppress these moments, but suppression becomes less effective as the unconscious grows stronger. This inner shift becomes even more pronounced when the avoidant is confronted with someone who activates their deeper feelings. The relationship becomes a mirror, reflecting back the emotional truths they deny. The more they try to maintain their facade, the more their authentic emotions seep through. They might become unusually attentive at times, then suddenly retreat. They may feel jealousy or protectiveness they don't want to acknowledge. Their behavior becomes inconsistent, not because they don't care, but because they care more than they know how to handle. The unconscious truth is no longer content to stay hidden. It wants to be seen, integrated, and expressed. Their body reacts as well. Avoidance is a psychological defense, but it has physical consequences. The tension they carry, the agitation they feel when they try to distance themselves, the subtle anxiety that rises when their persona is threatened, all of these are signs that the unconscious truth is breaking through. The persona can no longer hold the weight of the emotions it's trying to suppress. Their nervous system responds to the contradiction between what they outwardly claim and what they inwardly feel. They might find themselves restless, distracted, or preoccupied without understanding why. The unconscious is pulling at them, insisting that the truth be acknowledged. Over time, this struggle between the persona and the unconscious creates cracks in their emotional armor. These cracks are not signs of weakness, but signs of truth pushing forward. The avoidant begins to lose control over the narrative of not caring. The unconscious reveals itself through unexpected tenderness, through moments when they let their guard down without realizing it, through the way their eyes linger, or the way their voice softens, or the way they remember things no one expected them to. The persona tries to deny it, but the unconscious does not retreat. It forces them to confront the emotional reality they've spent their life avoiding, not through force, but through undeniable presence. Eventually, they realize that pretending not to care is no longer possible because the truth within them has grown louder than their fear. Emotional suppression creates an inner tension that eventually erupts through dreams, projections, and unexpected behaviors the avoidant can no longer rationalize away. For most avoidant individuals, suppressing feelings becomes a lifelong habit, almost like a reflex. They learned early in life that expressing emotions brought discomfort, unpredictability, or rejection. To protect themselves, they pushed their emotions inward, convinced that if they didn't acknowledge their feelings, those feelings couldn't hurt them. Suppression became their shield, and emotional distance became their strategy for survival. But the human psyche does not erase what it suppresses. It stores it, guards it, and waits for the moment when the truth can no longer remain hidden. Over time, the emotions they refuse to feel begin to gather weight. Suppression requires energy, constant quiet effort to keep certain thoughts, memories, and desires out of conscious reach. This creates an internal strain. On the surface, they appear calm, detached, or unaffected. But underneath, something is pulling at them. The tension grows slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. They might dismiss moments of emotional discomfort as nothing, brushing off any signs that their defenses are weakening. But the unconscious doesn't stay silent forever. It begins to communicate through indirect channels, finding ways to express what the conscious mind tries to block. Dreams are often the first place where this tension breaks through. In sleep, the avoidant loses conscious control. The guard they keep up during the day dissolves, and the emotions they've buried seep into their dream life. They might dream of being chased, overwhelmed, or confronted. They might dream of the very person they claim not to care about, experiencing emotions that feel clearer and more intense than anything they allow themselves to feel when awake. The dream becomes a stage where the unconscious reveals the truth that the avoidant can't acknowledge in daylight. They may wake up unsettled, confused, or irritated without understanding why the dream affected them so deeply. But these dreams are signals that the emotional pressure inside them is building. Projections are another way the unconscious bypasses suppression. Instead of admitting their own feelings, the avoidant begins to attribute them to others. If they feel longing, they may insist someone else is too attached. If they feel jealousy, they may accuse someone else of behaving inappropriately. If they feel vulnerable, they may label the other person as needy. This is not manipulation. It is a psychological defense. Their mind pushes discomfort outward so they don't have to face it internally. But projections eventually create confusion and conflict. They begin reacting to internal emotions as if they are external threats. Their behavior becomes harder to explain, even to themselves. They might withdraw suddenly, act irritated without cause, or overreact to small situations, all because the feelings they refuse to face are demanding acknowledgement. Unexpected behaviors begin surfacing as the emotional tension intensifies. They may find themselves reaching out impulsively after long periods of distance, feeling drawn to someone they tried to avoid. They might check a message thread repeatedly, even though they insist they're indifferent. They might feel a surge of fear when someone gets too close, followed by a surge of longing when that person pulls away. Their actions become inconsistent because their inner world is no longer aligned with the story they've been telling themselves. They can't explain why they reacted so strongly, why certain situations trigger them, or why someone they don't care about keeps appearing in their thoughts. At this stage, rationalization begins to break down. Avoidants rely heavily on rational explanations to maintain emotional distance. They tell themselves they're busy, uninterested, or simply incompatible. But as suppressed feelings rise, these explanations stop making sense. The intensity of their reactions doesn't match the narrative of indifference. Their emotional outbursts, unexpected softness, or abrupt withdrawals all reveal a truth they can't ignore. They may try to intellectualize what's happening, but the unconscious keeps pushing through, making it impossible to maintain the illusion of detachment. The inner tension reaches a point where they can no longer keep their emotions buried. The unconscious becomes louder, more insistent, more expressive. The avoidant may feel overwhelmed, confused, or even frustrated with themselves, sensing that something inside them is shifting. Suppression no longer protects them. It only amplifies the pressure. And in this struggle between avoidance and emotional truth, the unconscious always wins. The eruptions of emotion, the dreams that haunt them, the projections that distort their relationships, and the behaviors they can't explain all reveal a deeper truth they've tried to escape. Eventually, The avoidant is forced to confront the feelings they've spent a lifetime suppressing, not because they want to, but because the psyche refuses to let them run anymore. The relationship forces them to confront the shadow, everything they deny, fear, or reject, making their detachment impossible to maintain. For the avoidant, the shadow is not some dramatic external force, but the hidden warehouse of feelings, fears, and memories they spent years locking away. It holds the tenderness they're ashamed of, the longing they pretend not to feel, the vulnerability they believe is dangerous, and the parts of themselves they were taught were too much or not enough. When they enter a meaningful relationship, especially one that awakens emotional resonance, this shadow begins to move, stir, and demand recognition. The very presence of another person becomes a mirror reflecting back their buried truths, and suddenly the distance they rely on can't protect them from themselves. At first, the avoidant tries to maintain control using the tools they've always depended on, pulling away, shutting down, rationalizing feelings, or pretending to be unaffected. But relationships, particularly those that touch something deep within them, have a way of making the invisible visible. The avoidant begins to notice that being close to someone exposes parts of them they don't want to see. When the other person shows genuine care, it confronts the avoidant with the reality of their own desire for connection. When the other person expresses needs, it reflects the avoidant's own fear of dependency. When the other person becomes distant, the avoidant suddenly feels emotions they thought they were immune to. These moments are not small. They are cracks in the carefully constructed armor, openings through which the shadow slips out. The shadow reveals itself through intense reactions the avoidant doesn't understand. They may become irritated by gestures of affection because affection exposes softness they're terrified to acknowledge. They may feel criticized even when no criticism exists, because deep down they fear being inadequate. They may withdraw not because the other person is unsafe, but because closeness makes them confront wounds they thought they had buried. Each emotional encounter highlights something inside them they've denied for years. The avoidant thinks the conflict is between them and the other person, but the real conflict is internal, their true self clashing with the persona they use to feel safe. The relationship also mirrors their emotional contradictions. The avoidant wants connection, yet fears it, desires closeness, yet resists it, longs to be understood, yet hides their inner world. These contradictions create tension. When they care more than they intend to, the shadow pushes feelings toward the surface. When they try to detach, the shadow pulls them back with unexplained longing or sudden jealousy. They might tell themselves they're fine, that they don't need anyone, but their reactions betray deeper truths. The shadow exposes attachments they claim not to have, fears they refuse to acknowledge, and insecurities they pretend don't exist. This makes detachment harder to maintain because they are no longer fighting the outside world. They are fighting the parts of themselves they've avoided for years. In the presence of someone who matters, the shadow becomes especially loud. If the avoidant feels safe enough, even slightly, their suppressed emotions rise with force. If they feel threatened, the shadow shows in defensive behavior, pushing away someone they actually want close. Either way, the relationship becomes a catalyst. It pulls them toward emotional honesty, not through force, but through the unconscious need for integration. They begin realizing that the feelings they experience aren't coming from the other person, they are coming from within. What unsettles them is not the relationship, but their own internal world trying to emerge. The shadow also challenges their beliefs about themselves. They may have spent years believing they are independent, unaffected, or emotionally self-contained. But the relationship reveals how much they care, how deeply they feel, how sensitive they truly are beneath the surface. This self-discovery is uncomfortable because it contradicts the persona they've built. The avoidant may resist it, deny it, or attempt to minimize it, but the shadow continues pushing forward, insisting that the truth be seen. The more they try to run, the more the shadow follows, manifesting in reactions, impulses, and emotions they can't control. Eventually, the avoidant reaches a point where the shadow can no longer be ignored. The relationship has activated parts of them they didn't know how to handle, and the old strategies of detachment no longer work. Their defenses weaken not because they are failing, but because the psyche seeks wholeness. The shadow demands acknowledgement, and the relationship becomes the stage on which this inner conflict unfolds. The avoidant is faced with the truth that their feelings, fears, and vulnerabilities are real, present, and alive. And once these parts are awakened, pretending not to care becomes impossible because the shadow has revealed what their heart has tried so long to hide. When genuine connection triggers deep inner conflict, their defenses start to crumble, exposing the vulnerable self they've hidden even from themselves. For the avoidant, connection is not a gentle experience. It is an internal earthquake. It activates both the part of them that wants closeness and the part that fears it. This creates an emotional tension that becomes difficult to manage. When someone genuinely cares for them, listens to them, or shows consistent warmth, it stirs something the avoidant has kept dormant. They feel drawn toward the comfort of intimacy, but at the same time, proximity awakens the very fears that shaped their avoidance in the first place. This tug-of-war inside them becomes the source of their deepest conflict. They've lived most of their life believing that emotional independence is the safest path, that needing someone is a risk, and that letting someone in invites disappointment or abandonment. So when they begin to care, truly care, they feel the ground beneath them shift. Their usual strategies, pulling back, detaching, minimizing emotions, start losing effectiveness. The person they're trying to distance themselves from keeps resurfacing in their mind. Their thoughts betray them, their reactions betray them, and their silence no longer feels like strength but avoidance. They begin noticing their own contradictions, longing when the other person steps away, tension when the other person gets closer, frustration at themselves for feeling so much. These inconsistencies are the first signs that their defenses are weakening. As the bond deepens, the avoidant becomes increasingly aware of how fragile their emotional barriers really are. Moments of closeness, even small ones, have a profound impact on them. A sincere conversation, a moment of shared vulnerability, or simply feeling understood touches the very parts of them they've tried to hide. They might feel exposed simply by being seen. The emotional walls they've built over years begin to feel less like protection and more like limitations. They sense a crack forming in the armor they once thought was impenetrable. The more they try to reinforce it, the more the relationship highlights its weaknesses. The avoidant may respond with confusion, irritability, or abrupt distance because the feelings surfacing inside them are overwhelming. They aren't used to being emotionally activated. They aren't used to someone noticing when they pull away or caring when they go silent. This attention forces them to confront parts of themselves they've never fully examined. For someone who has built their identity on self-protection, being cared for creates a paradox. It satisfies an emotional need they've never admitted, but it also threatens their sense of safety. This contradiction makes their inner world feel unstable, and their defenses start to crumble under the emotional weight. They begin experiencing vulnerability in ways that feel unfamiliar. They may find themselves wanting to reach out when they normally wouldn't. They may feel jealousy when they thought they were immune to it. They may notice a sinking feeling when the other person is distant or unavailable. These emotions expose the depth of their attachment. The avoidant tries to dismiss these reactions as temporary or meaningless, but the truth is that genuine connection has opened a part of them they've kept locked away. Their emotional responses become larger than their rational explanations, breaking through the walls they've relied on. This exposure is not something they choose. It happens naturally as their inner defenses weaken. They start showing their vulnerability unintentionally through their tone, their eyes, their responses. They may soften in moments they cannot explain. They may protect the other person without admitting why. They may remember details they insisted didn't matter. Their behavior gradually shifts, revealing feelings they've tried to suppress. These shifts are subtle at first, but over time, they become undeniable. Their emotional truth begins to surface even when they fight against it. This internal conflict also challenges their self-image. They've long believed they were detached, unaffected, and self-contained. But genuine connection reveals that beneath their avoidance lies a deeply feeling individual, someone capable of longing, attachment, and emotional depth. This realization can be frightening because it contradicts everything they've believed about themselves. Yet it is also liberating, because the collapse of their defenses allows them to experience parts of life they have kept themselves from. For the first time, they see glimpses of the self they've hidden, not the controlled, distant version, but the authentic one beneath it. As the internal conflict intensifies, they find it harder to maintain their emotional distance. Their defenses weaken not out of failure, but because the truth within them grows stronger. The more genuine the connection becomes, the more their avoidance falters. And once their vulnerable self begins to surface, the avoidant cannot hide behind detachment in the same way anymore. Their heart, no longer silent, makes itself known, pushing them toward emotional honesty even as they struggle to accept it. The moment they stop pretending not to care is the moment their inner world demands integration, pushing them toward authenticity rather than avoidance. This shift does not begin with a conscious decision. It begins with a quiet internal insistence, the psyche's refusal to let the avoidant keep dividing themselves into the protected version they show to the world and the emotional truth they keep buried inside. For most avoidants, life has been lived in two parts: the outer self that maintains distance and control, and the inner self that feels more than they allow themselves to admit. When caring reaches a point where it can no longer be denied, these two selves begin colliding, and the pressure to integrate becomes unavoidable. The unconscious pushes them toward honesty because pretending not to care requires ongoing effort, and emotional truth requires none. This difference becomes overwhelming. Maintaining avoidance becomes exhausting. There is a weight they can't explain, a tension they can't identify, a sense of dissatisfaction that grows with every attempt to withdraw. The feelings they once suppressed start affecting their body, their thoughts, their behavior. They feel a pull toward the person they're trying to detach from, even when their logic tells them to stay distant. They may feel restless, irritable, or distracted when they attempt to suppress their feelings. Their emotional truth becomes louder than their intellectual defenses. This marks the beginning of authenticity. Authenticity does not mean dramatic confession or sudden transformation. It means allowing themselves to feel without hiding behind a mask. They begin acknowledging emotions instead of denying them. They start recognizing their longing instead of dismissing it. They allow themselves to care, even if they don't yet know how to express it. This shift is subtle but profound. It shows in the way they begin choosing connection in small ways, responding more openly, listening more deeply, or showing consideration without expecting anything in return. These are signs of their inner world aligning with their outer behavior. The avoidant also becomes more aware of their own contradictions. They see how pretending not to care no longer matches their internal reality. When they ignore someone they care about, it hurts them rather than protects them. When they pull away, the distance feels empty rather than peaceful. When they silence their feelings, the silence becomes louder inside. These experiences expose the truth that their emotional needs did not disappear. They were simply pushed into the unconscious. Now that the unconscious has surfaced, authenticity becomes the only path that feels aligned. This push toward integration also brings self-recognition. They begin to see that their avoidance was never a lack of feeling, but a fear of feeling. When caring becomes undeniable, they confront the part of themselves that longed for connection all along. This recognition is not weakness. It is the beginning of self-awareness. It allows them to understand why they built walls in the first place and why those walls can no longer protect them. Instead of distancing to feel safe, they begin exploring the idea that safety might come from being seen, understood, and emotionally present. As integration deepens, the avoidant becomes more receptive to emotional truth. They realize that vulnerability does not destroy them. It opens them. They see that caring does not imprison them. It expands them. Their defenses crumble not because they fail, but because they evolve. The more authentic they become, the less they need to hide behind detachment. Their emotional responses become more consistent with their internal world. Their actions reflect their genuine feelings. They experience a sense of relief, even if they struggle with expressing it, because aligning with their truth feels more natural than maintaining a persona. Ultimately, when the avoidant stops pretending not to care, they step into an unfamiliar but liberating space. They begin meeting themselves honestly for the first time. Their emotional truth, once buried under layers of fear, becomes a guide instead of a threat. Authenticity becomes a path toward connection, not a risk to run from. And in this space, they finally recognize that caring is not a weakness to hide, but a truth that brings them closer to who they are becoming.